The numbers are right. Everything reconciled. Nothing is missing. There's more data than ever, and less room to think. So what do we actually do next? That's the moment you realize the math was almost helpful.
Hey, it's Cashflow Mike, and welcome back to another episode of the Clear Path to Cash. And today we're going to be talking about how do I answer what do we do next, right? That's probably the most common question you're ever going to get in advisory services. And this is the question that shows up in almost every conversation sooner or later, right? That client's going to look at you and ask, hey, what do we do next? You know, and it sounds simple when you hear it. That's an easy question to ask. It should be an easy question to answer. But if you've ever been in that chair, you know that it carries a lot of weight. That question does, right? I was working with a member, you know, on a situation, and here's what exactly happened. Here's the exact thing that happened. This business had a lot of different issues happening at the same time, right? The margins were tighter than expected. I mean, cash was like almost non-existent, if at all. And the owner was considering adding another employee. You've seen it, like going, you know what I need? I need another person. If I had another person, it'd be great. Well, the advisor understood the numbers, and they had done all the prep work, and they could explain what was changing in the business because they could see the numbers moving up and down. And then the client asked what they should do about it. What should we do next, right? And it's when this advisor paused for just a second. And it wasn't a dramatic pause, you know, like you see in cinema. It was just enough to feel the weight of the question. And then they started talking through a bunch of different possibilities, right? We could look at pricing. You know, we could look at and review your expenses, or we could slow down on the hiring decision. You know, they could build a forecast. Think about it. All these ideas at certain times make sense because they do, right? Those are good things that advisors do. But that's actually the problem. When they say those many things, that's a problem, right? When several answers make sense, the client still needs someone to choose a path, right? Think about it. You're at a fork in the road. You don't want to know that all of the things could be right. You just want to know which one should I go to next, right? That's where confidence comes in from not just you, the advisor, but the business owner, the client that you're working with, also gets confidence from that decision. And confidence is not pretending that there's only one thing to consider. You know, it comes from having a way to sort through the situation while the conversation is still happening, right? Not waiting till later, not just flooding them with a bunch of ideas to begin with. So we took this client situation, we worked it through the fix framework, right? The fix framework, find the burning issue, you know, is the first thing we're going to do. We're going to start by finding the burning issue. And at first, it seemed like cash flow was going to be the issue because the owner was always worried about cash. But as we looked closer, the pressure was really coming from margins. It was actually coming from the way they were running their business, the actual business model. And the business was selling work, but too much of that work wasn't producing enough profit, right? There's no reason to do a bunch of work if you're not going to make any money. So the focus, even though it's contributing to cash flow, wasn't necessarily true cash flow, which is timing and money. This is about profit. The business model wasn't working. So then we identify what was driving that. We use some of the pricing tools that are inside the Clear Path to Cash, and then we looked at it at a job level performance, right? Down to the customer, down to the product. And it showed us that the issue wasn't, you know, across the whole business. It was just certain types of work that he was producing and estimating that were underpriced. Think about that. Like all of a sudden, it isn't just this big cloud above us. It's something I can focus on. Oh, it's these three types of jobs. When I do those jobs, I don't price them high enough. Well, that mattered because it changes the advice, right? If you think about the issue as broad profitability, you might tell the client to cut expenses, you know, or raise prices across the board. But if the fuel source is specific underpriced work, the next step can be a lot more focused. So the actions really became really clear once we could see that it was only a few different things that he had to change. Just adjust the pricing on underperforming jobs, you know, this month. And believe it or not, starting with those jobs where the gap was, it was easy for us to prove, and it was easier for us to measure because we could really focus in on those specific jobs itself. So the conversation felt different almost instantly. And the client wasn't sitting there with a whole list of possibilities anymore. They had a specific move to make. And that's where, the advisor's confidence changed too, because they didn't have to keep explaining. They didn't have to keep just throwing out new ideas, just spaghetti against the wall. They had, different options. What they had was a structure, believe it or not, that helped them choose the next step. It was almost automatic. It like pulled them into the next step. And that's what the clients are really asking for. When they say, what do we do next? It isn't another set of ideas. It's the next step. They aren't asking you for every idea. They just want you to help them move one step over. And the movement requires focus. And that's where many tools that I've seen out there, many tools I've used, stop short. They can show the problem, they can organize numbers, they can help you explain what happened. But when the client is waiting for direction, the advisor needs more than a report. They need a way to think. And that's what the Clear Path to Cash is designed to support. This app, it's going to help you work through that same sequence again and again and again. You're going to find the burning issue. You're going to identify what causes it to get on fire. And then you execute and put the fire out. So what's the issue? What's driving it? And what action should be taken right now? What action should we be taking right now? That's the sequence that's going to give you confidence, because you're no longer relying on whatever answer comes to mind first. You're going to be using a framework that's going to show you how to slow the situation down without losing, the whole room. Think about it. When you hear professional football players talk, you hear them talk about the game slowed down for them because they could see it and they knew the next move. They knew exactly what was going to happen next, right? So they stopped feeling like, they were just showing people information. They started feeling like they were guiding their clients to the next step, right? That's your role as the advisor. What is that next step? What are we going to do? So if you've ever been in that moment where the client asked you, what do you do next? And you could feel yourself searching for a clean answer, right? Well, this is exactly why this framework matters, because you don't need to memorize every possible response. You don't need a path that's going to help you get to the right response from that client in that situation. That's where confidence comes in. Find the burning issue. Try to stick with one, right? That's where the focus is going to come from. That's where your confidence is going to come from. Get them to move to one next step, not 50 miles down the road, the one next step. And, if you want to see how I do it, I built it into the app, right? If you want to see how it works inside the app, go look at that demo, right? Just explore the interactive demo. Go check out how it thinks. Look for the words fix, right? Anywhere you are. Find the burning issue. That's step one. Identify what's causing it burn. Step two, by using the tools. And then execute. Hold people accountable by giving them specific actions on what to do to improve their business. Because I want you to pay attention to how this system moves from analysis to action, because that's where the real value lives in every advisor. And if you felt that moment where it's all over the place, where it's everywhere, where there's so many different options we could take, if you felt that moment, well, trust me, that moment, I know it. And the Clear Path to Cash was built for that moment.
The numbers are right. Everything reconciled. Nothing is missing. There's more data than ever, and less room to think. So what do we actually do next? That's the moment you realize the math was almost helpful.